Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great week. In this video, I want to talk about why you should learn PHP in 2020. If you're new to the channel, you may not know that I'm primarily a C# developer. Quick aside, if you want to know why you should learn C# in 2020, go check out last week's video. I'll leave it linked in the description below. However, I'm also a PHP developer and have been for more than 15 years, longer than I've actually been a C# developer. PHP was actually the first language that I used to build a project for production use, and the language and platform have come a long way since then. In 2005, I was using PHP 4. Since then, PHP 5 made significant improvements, and each version of PHP 7 has brought even more enhancements that keeps PHP competitive with other programming languages, especially on the web, which is our first reason you should learn PHP in 2020. PHP was specifically designed for the web and has always been intended for use building dynamic web applications. 25 years ago, it was built as a series of macros to make it easier to build HTML pages based on server-side data and additional information contained in a web request. Of course, since then it has evolved tremendously with support for multiple different web server technologies like Apache and Nginx, as well as application development platforms like Laravel, CodeIgniter, and my own MVC framework called Pales, which I'll link in the description and do a video on sometime in the near future, as well as full-fledged content management systems like WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. Basically, the point here is that if you're looking for a language that is and always has been web first, PHP definitely fits the bill. Of course, just being web first doesn't mean it's the only web-friendly language, and many other languages and frameworks have caught up or possibly even surpassed PHP, depending on who you ask. Python has Django, Ruby has Rails, the .NET world has several different flavors of ASP.NET, and other languages have their own web frameworks too. So why might you want to learn PHP over all those other languages? My first reason, and possibly the biggest reason, is that it's very accessible to programmers of all skill levels, even people who have never written a line of code before. In fact, it's not uncommon for PHP developers to start out as WordPress site builders, just installing WordPress, adding themes and plugins, and building very dynamic, very powerful web applications without writing a single line of code. Then, as they start to exceed the capabilities of the plugins and themes that they found, they start to build their own, usually starting with themes and then moving on gradually to more and more complex plugins. This relatively gentle learning curve means it's totally something that you can teach yourself with the help of some documentation and a few YouTube videos. However, I've also heard some more experienced developers complain that there's a lot of bad PHP out there. Some even use this as a criticism of PHP, but I think this is more indicative of three positive aspects of PHP, one of which being what I just mentioned, its accessibility. Basically, there seem to be a large number of PHP developers who have been able to write a bit of code and solve the problem without needing to become experts in software engineering first. This means that they can go from non-programmer to having a bit of code solve the problem in very little time. The second reason I think the volume of so-called bad PHP out there is a win for PHP is that it's very easy to quickly write a solution to a given problem with PHP regardless of skill level. That is, even very experienced developers can write so-called bad PHP. The negative characterization is based more on stylistic philosophies than on security or performance characteristics. Basically, someone holds the opinion that it's not written the way that someone with an extensive software engineering background would have written a high-performance application that stays maintainable and extensible for the long term, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't still solve the author's problem. Simple problems deserve simple solutions, and it's entirely possible that the problem will never become any more complex, at least not for the original author. That's not to say that there isn't also some truly insecure, bad PHP out there. There are certain features of PHP that, when misused, could lead to security vulnerabilities or performance issues, like denial of service attacks, but we'll leave an in-depth discussion of that for another video. The third reason that this is actually a positive for PHP is that in some cases it's indicative that a piece of code has never had to be updated since it was originally written, possibly as far back as PHP 4. This is because PHP has always had a strong commitment to backwards compatibility, almost to a fault. There have been a few features that were deprecated and removed, or in some cases the default configuration values were altered from version to version to remove specific features by default as security best practices were updated. But by and large, any PHP that ran on PHP 4 will still run on modern versions of PHP. Name one other platform for which the same can be said. Go on, I dare you. Leave a comment below. I think I've sufficiently beaten to death my opinion that the presence of bad PHP is actually an indication of PHP's strengths, so let's move on to my final reason why I believe PHP is worth learning in 2020. And that would be its prevalence. You can run PHP just about anywhere. In fact, there are still some hosting providers that provide free PHP hosting services. I wouldn't necessarily recommend them for a production site, but they might work well for a personal website or a quick test. In addition, WordPress, built in PHP, is by far the dominant CMS. PHP may not be the hot new thing, but it's not going away anytime soon. In fact, work is in progress on the next version of PHP, PHP 8, which is slated for release later this year. It has a ton of great new features to position PHP to be even more relevant in 2021. I won't get into the details, maybe in a future video, but there are plenty of reasons to learn PHP in 2020, even without PHP 8, and enough to be excited about for the future of PHP. I hope this video was helpful. If you liked it, do me a favor and hit the like button below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell to be notified when I post more PHP videos, or C# videos, or even videos about drones. I'll leave that one linked below too. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.